back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be checking out the all-new Transformers Kingdom Voyager class Rhinox. A figure that I know many of you have been going bonkers for, but to be honest with you, I haven't really been looking forward to this guy all that much. Not because I don't like the character, but when comparing this figure to the actual Thrilling 30 release, just by some of those initial promo images, I honestly wasn't all that hyped. But I have got to say that actually having him in hand, he's turned out a lot better than I initially suspected. But before we take a look at the main figure himself, we'll very quickly go over the packaging. You can see really cool artwork of Rhinox in both robot mode as well as of course in his Rhino mode. As we spin around here to the back, we've got some product shots and we also have got that same Kingdom artwork, and I was very surprised to see that we have in fact actually got pretty much all of the characters shown here besides Tigertron, which is rumoured to be the next Voyager class in Kingdom. But taking a look here at Rhinox from a front perspective, this figure has turned out pretty awesome. Now unfortunately I don't own the Thrilling 30 figure and I've always wanted to. I've just completely missed the ball when it was originally released, and the aftermarket prices for that figure definitely are astronomical, especially for a 7-year-old release. But here we've got the Kingdom version, and I will be honest and say that I am pretty satisfied with this figure. I think he's turned out quite decently. And now, as per tradition with the majority of these Beast Wars Kingdom figures, this guy does take heavy inspiration from his original 90s debut, albeit this time in some regards slightly stylized in order to match what I presume we shall see in the Kingdom Netflix series, and I do think he looks pretty cool. So here for the head sculpt, you can see it is undeniably Rhinox. Unfortunately, they have decided to leave the maximal tattoos off of his head sculpt, which does lead this here to look slightly bland in comparison to some of the other head sculpts that we've gotten in the line. I have no idea as to why they skimped this out, as far as I'm concerned, this guy does not have any maximal insignias placed on him at all, which is a missed opportunity. I do, however, love the faux jaw that we've got going on here. Of course, it would have been near enough impossible to use the actual Rhino jaw and to get it looking this accurate, as it was a lot bigger when in comparison to the size of the Rhino's head. And I think the detail on that, as well as the sculpt work, really does look fantastic. You can see for the shoulders, I think this two's all turned out really well. You can see here for the forearms, really nice. I'll take a closer look at the fingers once we cover the weapons in just a second. But as we spin our attention here down to the lower section, you can see the thigh armor there looks fantastic. A really nice bulky design here for the character. I'm not a huge fan of this gap that we've got going on here for the legs. It certainly does look rather unsightly, and this was one of the qualms that I did have when the initial promo images were shown. I was hoping that it was mistransformed, however unfortunately it's not. This is how the legs look, and they definitely are not the best, at least in my opinion. The feet, however, do look fantastic, and surprisingly have got quite a decent amount of detail as well as paint applied to them. And then we spin around here to the back of Rhinox. Now you can see that he is very hollow, and of course you're more than likely not going to display your figure from the back, but I'm almost certain there was something that Hasbro and Takara Tomy could have done in order to conceal this. Maybe if they could have found a way to just utilize this back component just to maybe split in half, and then this could have folded up just to conceal these sections, that probably wouldn't have looked as bad as it does. But as mentioned, it is the back, so what are you going to do? You can see we've got the Rhino head there, which is very accurate to the show. The instructions fail to mention that you can in fact actually tuck the jaw behind in order to match his appearance from the Beast Wars series, which I think looks really cool. And overall, it's just a really nice looking figure. You can see a nice lime green used here. I imagine that we're more than likely going to get a Netflix rendition of this guy, which hopefully does fix the issue that I have with the maximal insignias. But definitely a really nice looking sculpt and quite decent paint apps. As far as articulation is concerned, Rhinox does have a ball joint here at the head, which allows him to look left to right, up and down. We do get a full rotation here at the shoulder, which is decent, as well as a faux butterfly joint due to transformation, which is excellent. Unfortunately, we've got a really ugly joint here, however, for the range of motion kicking out to the side. You can see that just does not look the best at all, and really is something I wish they perfected before they did actually hit the release button on this guy, as I'll be honest and say this is one of the ugliest cuts that I've seen from Kingdom so far. We do get a rotation here at the elbow, as well as a 90-degree range of motion. Sadly, no form of wrist rotation, despite it being more than possible to do so. We do get a waist joint, and honestly, we don't get a great range of motion out of this, so this is a joint that they also could have skipped, but I'm super glad that they did add that in there, as it just allows for a little more expression when posing him into some of those more dynamic poses. You can see the leg can kick forwards that far, as well as back to about that far. Of course, you can do the splits. We also do get a semi-double joint here at the knee due to transformation, so there's a hinge joint here, and then there's also the transformation joint, and you can utilize both of them to kick slightly past 90, but quite honestly, you are only supposed to use this one below this green thigh cut. And then of course we do get a rotation here at the thigh, and I was really surprised to see that the thigh armor will in fact move out of the way in order to accommodate that. And then finally, as per tradition with War for Cybertron, we do get an ankle rocker pivot forwards and backwards, as well as of course side to side. So overall, it's definitely a pretty decent Voyager. He feels hefty, none of the components feel particularly cheap, which is cool. However, I am not a big fan of the guns at all. I think these are incredibly weak, and when compared to the Thrilling 30 figure, are just completely garbage. They've got no substance to them. They're incredibly skinny and spindly and really do not look as if though they would do any damage to their Predacon opponents. The paint and sculpt work does look pretty decent here from the front. However, you can see two pegs which we will utilize for transformation, and this is also something that I'm not a massive fan of. I do like how they've been painted, but I don't get why Hasbro are so afraid to utilize gimmicks on mainline figures anymore. For those of you who have the Thrilling 30 figure, you guys all know that it had a little button that when pushed would allow this to rotate. As it stands, you can't even manually rotate this. This is in fact glued to this grey piece, which is such a shame in my opinion, but I imagine for many collectors it will be something that they'll easily be able to look over. Just to give you a look here at Rhinox's hands, you can see the sculpt work on the fingers looks really nice. And of course, we've just got the closed fist. So definitely really nice looking sculpt work, really nice attention to detail. It's just that I wish they could have perhaps perfected the lower section here to the legs and those weapons. For those who own the Thrilling 30 figure, I would definitely recommend throwing these in the trash and then utilizing those weapons. He can definitely inherit those. Here for a very quick Kingdom, Voyager and Deluxe size comparison, we of course have Rhinox compared next to Optimus Primal, Rat Trap, Cheetor, and the previously released Beast Wars Voyager class, that being Dinobot. And I think he scales really well with these characters. Despite him being ever so slightly smaller than Dinobot, he more than makes up for it in terms of heft, so that is really cool to see. And judging by 90s accuracy, I think the scale between him and Primal and Rat Trap also works quite well. But to be honest, I just cannot wait now to see these guys back on the screen when Chapter 3 Kingdom hit Netflix, as it will be really cool to see how they now interact with one another. So, transformation here for Rhinox, certainly one of the more difficult ones out of Kingdom so far. I'd say that he's certainly up there with the leader Beast Wars Megatron, and is definitely more akin to the conversions that we used to get back in the day, roughly around Revenge of the Fallen and Hunt for the Decepticons, especially where Voyagers are concerned. So to begin with, you're going to want to bring in his two spinning blasters, which of course don't spin due to laziness on Hasbro's part, and tap them together in a way so that the actual handles do in fact face the same way, just like that. We can of course set them there off to the side. You're going to want to come here to the forearm, lift this panel up, which will allow you to take the wrist and of course fold that back in. And much like I mentioned earlier on, there really is no excuse for why there's no wrist swivel here for Rhinox, as it's something they easily could have done. We then want to compress that down, of course come here to this side and repeat the exact same process. So fold that in. We can then rotate here in order to create the front Rhino leg and repeat the same process. You'll then want to turn your attention here to the back, and I recommend just hinging this section up, taking Rhinox bot mode head, rotating that around, and then you can take the real Rhino jaw and pull this out if you have decided to tuck it in. You'll then want to come here to this section, disengage the chest piece, fold this in upon itself and compress that in there, which is really nice in my opinion. We can then take these sections here, just angle them down for now, and here with the arms, this is where things can get slightly tricky. So you're going to want to hinge forwards, and then we also do get a second hinge joint here, which you're going to want to tuck underneath the Rhino head, and at the same time rotate here just like so, so that we have created something along the lines of this. So you can roughly see now where everything's going. So hinge that down, hinge this section in, and then rotate here at the shoulder at the same time. And then we can take the Rhino head, bring this down, and of course that will conceal the bot mode head. Really nice conversion where that aspect is concerned. But then of course we turn our attention here down to the lower legs, and this is by far where things can get incredibly convoluted. So to begin with, hinge these sections out just to allow for some clearance. You're going to want to take these pieces and extend them all the way out until they clip into place. Repeat the same process here on this side. We can then take this section, hinge this open, and of course repeat the exact same process. You'll then want to split these slightly just to allow for some clearance, as essentially you're going to explode the leg. So hinge here at the transformation joint, not at the robot mode knee joint. So hinge here, and then that will allow you to bring this section up. We can then hinge the foot, rotate this around, and this tab is now going to peg there into that slot. So just clip that in there. Now, here is where things can get very tedious. So I would recommend bringing this section forward, which is in fact the Rhino tail, and then coming here to the back leg, pulling this out, rotate, and then collapse that section down. You'll then want to flip here to the top, and essentially you're going to want to tuck this foot underneath this hollow gap. So bring this down, just like so, and then with a bit of luck, that section should align up. If it's not aligning up perfectly right now, it certainly will do later on. With this region, you're going to want to angle out. So there's various different hinge joints. There's a hinge joint here, as well as a hinge joint here. Now, unfortunately, they're both facing in opposite directions. So whereas this one goes back and forth, this one here goes up and down. So you really need to manipulate these to get to work together in order to bring this around and down just like that. Once that's complete, we can then straighten this out, and you can see a slot here that will in fact peg into this tab. So just bring that in and snap.
that section into place just like so, and then I would recommend completing the exact same process here on the opposite side. So bend here at the transformation joint, bring this section up. You'll then want to take the foot, hinge this out, rotate around. That tab will peg into that slot. So just snap that in there appropriately just to ensure that is actually pegged in there. You'll then want to come here again, fold out the butt section of the Rhino. We can then take the back leg, hinge that out, rotate, and then straighten that down just like this. And then come here to the top, fold this section in upon itself so that it does sit underneath this piece. Come here to this side, bring this up and over, and just ensure that everything does stay aligned up appropriately. Hinge that down. Come here to this foot, ensure that that does stay also down, and then just according everything so that we can get this here to sit flush. So just bring that out, snap that there into place. Of course, come here to this section, and you're going to want to snap that in there as well. So we've got something that looks along the lines of this. Now, before we actually begin concealing all of this, you're then going to want to bring in the blasters. Now, the blasters have got 2 pegs on them here and here. These are in fact going to slide into those slots in there. So what you're going to want to do is slightly pry apart the legs and then pop this in here until that does tab in, and then of course align this one up as well. Tap that into place, and that is the weapon storage for his beast mode. Come here to the top, we can then tab the butt into place, of course, align all this up, and you can see various different tabs and slots. All of this here is hopefully going to come together in order to conceal the main portion of the body that we've got here for Rhinox. So just snap all of that together, bring the arms down, just tidy everything up, and there you've got Kingdom Rhinox fully transformed up into his rather cool looking Rhino alt mode. Now, this mode for me is actually really cool. I don't own any Transformer in my collection that can transform into a Rhino, and I don't even own a Rhinox figure, so to actually get this guy was a whole new experience, and it's really cool. I think the Rhino mode for the most part turned out really nicely. You can see some nice detailing there for the head. We've got the horns there, which have been sculpted really well despite them being made out of a slightly more pliable material, but they are nowhere near as pliable as I initially suspected, which is super cool to see. You can see we've got a nice pattern applied, I imagine, to give you that impression of a realistic Rhino. You can see really nice details there for the nostrils. If we just drop the jaw down, all the bottom rows of teeth are in fact correct and present. Really nice silver paint as well as a red tongue. You can see some nice red detailing there for the eyes, as well as some fantastic sculpt work where the eyelids would be. The ears all look fantastic. You've got the very thick shoulder section there. Really awesome attention to detail. I think the Rhino mode is very well done. Even here at the back, you can see some nice skin texture detail to the back section of Rhinox, which is super cool. You can see the tail there, which does look slightly unusual. I wish maybe that could have been a separate piece so that it could have slightly hung out a little better. But nevertheless, it looks quite cool. Of course, we've got some robot mode kibble evident. It would have been awesome to see them find a way to maybe just cast this in grey plastic so that it doesn't look as obtrusive here in Rhino mode. But honestly, that's the only critique I have with the figure. Of course, you can flip here to the underside and moan all day about the back section here being green. But to be honest with you, I think they've done a very well done job. Now, as far as articulation is concerned, the jaw can open and close, which is cool. And I imagine you could probably find something to stuff in there. The shoulders can hinge back and forwards, but are very limited. Unfortunately, no hinge joint here at where I presume the elbow would be, but due to transformation, you can hinge them inwards. So if you want him perhaps tumbling over or just about to attack a Predacon, that will definitely make for some really cool photography options. And then here for the hind legs, sadly, we don't really get a lot of articulation. They can hinge forwards and backwards as well as in and out due to transformation, but that is pretty much it for the Rhino mode. A very bulky, a very chunky figure, and definitely does have quite a significant amount of weight to him, especially being a now modern day Voyager class. Here for your Kingdom Maximal size comparison, we've got Rhinox compared next to Primal, Cheetor and Rat Trap, essentially the core Season 1 Maximal team, and I think he looks really nice with these characters. You can see that when comparing him next to the Voyager Primal, I think the scale here is pretty decent, and I'll be sure to post some images throughout this review of Primal actually riding on the back of Rhinox, much like we saw in the show. You can see the scale here with Rat Trap, of course not accurate to a real life representation by any stretch of the imagination, but we will see how they do stack up with one another when Kingdom does eventually hit Netflix. graphics. And then here, of course, we've got Cheetor also compared next to Rhinox. And to be fair, they are roughly exactly the same. Of course, Cheetor is a lot skinnier and a lot slender than Rhinox, but as far as actual length is concerned, if you were to put them tail to tail, they are literally the exact same size and also the same height, depending on how you do choose to display Cheetor's legs. But I definitely think they look awesome with one another, and I just cannot wait to hopefully fill out some more voids in the Predacon collection. It'd be really cool to get Tarantulas and of course Pterosaur. I know that Waspinator is on the horizon, so be sure to stay tuned for his review, hopefully shortly on the channel. But definitely really happy with the Maximals that we've gotten from this line so far. And so, some final thoughts here for Transformers Kingdom Voyager class Rhinox. Overall, I definitely like this figure. I think he's a really nice Voyager figure. Of course, I do have some discrepancies in robot mode. Most noticeably would be that split that we've got going on for the lower section of the leg, but honestly that's just a minor critique for what is otherwise a pretty decent figure. I think the colour scheme, whilst not 100% accurate to how he appeared in the 90s series, is still pretty decent and certainly harkens back to the original source material. I do find, however, the lack of maximal tattoos on his forehead to be a major missed opportunity. I think that was definitely something they could have done, and I have really and truly no idea as to why they chose against it. I'm not a massive fan of his weapons. I think they're really puny and rather weak when in comparison to the Thrilling 30 figure, but for those who own that release, of course you can essentially just give those weapons to this guy and I think he'd be pretty much perfect. I don't unfortunately actually own the Thrilling 30 figure, so I can't really give you a direct comparison with that guy and tell you which figure is better. All I can say, however, is that judging by some of the images that I've managed to find online, the Thrilling 30 figure has got some good points about it, but also some bad points that the Kingdom version does perfect on. So ultimately, it will come up to your own personal preference. I certainly am very happy with this Voyager. The transformation, while certainly on the more complex side, and for those younger collectors, I definitely think may need some additional support with that conversion. I think for me personally, I found it to be quite an enjoyable challenge. There are some panels which do require a little bit of work just to get them 100% perfected, but I've always preferred my Transformers more complex than simplified, so honestly, I won't moan too much about that. And I think the Rhino mode is very well done, despite some green colorization showing. I think it's pretty much spot on, and I really love the detail that we've got going on for the head, the skin texture detail, as well as the overall body proportions. So overall, Kingdom Rhinox definitely does get a recommendation for me. I would love to know down in the comment section below what you guys think of this figure. Is it one that you're planning to add to the collection? As mentioned right at the beginning of this video, I do know many of you are super hyped to get this figure, and for good reason too. He's definitely a very solid Voyager, and I cannot wait to see what Hasbro and Takara Tomy have up their sleeves in regards to the Voyager class Tigatron. I thank you all so much for watching, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.